Okay, hello, welcome back. Just quickly before we get into this video, just wanted to acknowledge that a new preview trailer for Final Fantasy VII has dropped. I'm super excited about it, and I have this really big hope that they will, that you'll be able to play all the characters in it. I think it'd be really awesome to play as Yuffie in it, just because, hey, a hyperactive ninja, who wouldn't want to play as that? So what I'm talking about is this concept in this video of assumed knowledge. And so, in real life, you gain knowledge, very quickly. Or you gain knowledge in a certain way. Basically, you start at the beginning, you learn about something, and you acquire more and more knowledge of it as your understanding of it grows. The same with skills, abilities that you may have. You start at the bottom tier of the skills. You train at the very lowest, then you work your way up to kind of the higher tiers. And the more time and effort you devote to learning or training yourself, the more skills you'll have. Now, video games will mirror this. Let's jump over to skills. Now, this is what is known as a skill tree. So, we're going to look at, let me see if I can find. I always forget exactly where they are. That's stealth. That's knife master. Wait. I'll get to it. Here we are. Chameleon, or as I call it, the stealth predator ability. That's one of my favorite abilities. Allows Eevee to essentially turn invisible when she stops moving. It's a really cool ability, and as you can see, it's at the bottom of this particular skill tree. So you have to go through it and unlock the very simple stuff. So first, the whistle to attract attention is the first one. Lockpicking 1, lockpicking 2, and then silent assassin steps, basically move silently, and then finally you unlock this one. So it grows and you learn the skill in this regard. That's how this game handles skills. Okay, so let's take a look at how a different game handles the skills tree. In this case, it is remarkably similar, but they're divided into kind of the three sections, as is the previous one. This time you have to unlock the initial one skill to be able to unlock the other skills, and then if you want to, say, build up to that skill, you unlock it going that way forward. It's pretty much the same. For some reason, just speaking of my personal gameplay, I did not find this skill tree as intense or as interesting. There were a few skills that I looked at and said I want to unlock, but oftentimes when I get a skill to unlock, I get to this point and be like, I'm not really into any of these. What should I go for? And I, kind of dilly-dally on it. So, whereas with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, I was very eager to unlock, all these new and cool skills. Okay, a final look at skills trees here. This is in BioShock 2, and it's subtly different from BioShock 1. In the original BioShock, there were 4, I believe, different tiers, and you applied the different skills and ability in each tier. In this game, you had the plasmids, which are kind of like your active powers and abilities, like be able to throw a fireball or a lightning bolt or things like that. And then you had the tonics, which are more of the passive abilities. Like being able to run faster, being able to do these things. And this is actually a fairly open way you can, build your character up more. So the original game was very limiting in that you only had 6 slots for different types. So if you wanted more of a certain type, more than 6 of a certain type equipped, you couldn't do it. And in this one, you can. You can equip more than... you can equip 7 or 8 of one type, but, you take away from the other types that you have. And it's actually a pretty normal way to kind of upgrade yourself. This isn't so much as learned skills here, however, as kind of genetic modifications, which is what the basis of this game really is the genetic, mess around with your genetic code and your modifications and so forth. Okay, so we are back here to kind of talk about the concept of the Mary Sue. Now, Mary Sue, the current definition of a Mary Sue is a idealized character who can do things that are seemingly beyond their abilities or their training or previous knowledge or skills. So I'm going to use this as an example. So interestingly enough, if Chameleon was one of the early abilities, if this was at the very top where Whistle is, then Evie wouldn't be considered to be a Mary Sue because she had done, years of training as an assassin far before this game began. Now, the assumption of Mary Sue is that they will not have done any of these years of training. What they will have done is they will basically have absolutely no skills. So imagine somebody never having been an assassin, never having trained in combat, fighting, or anything, suddenly showing up and being able to engage in these skills. Offhand, in a couple of movies, certain characters are accused of being Mary Sues. Generally, their characters... there seems to be this weird sort of idea that if a character is a minority or is considered to be a part of a minority group, they can't be shown as having weaknesses, so they automatically know things that they shouldn't know. They don't need any trade, they don't need anything beyond that. And they're automatically elevated to the point where they never ever make mistakes. And the thing about it is a good character will sometimes make mistakes and make fools of themselves. Let's take the original Captain America, the First Avenger, the movie. It completely and totally embarrassed me, and I just hated the moment. I hate being embarrassed when I'm watching a movie. That's just me. When Captain America didn't know the meaning of the word fondue and made an assumption, thinking it was something completely different. And, that completely embarrassed me when he did it in a movie, but it was a natural mistake for him to make, not having known about it. And so in that regard, he was not a Mary Sue. He was, he was someone who's, learned and grows as the story progresses, as most characters really do. And we're going to end, ironically, with Hitman. 47. This is ironic because 47 doesn't really gain any sort of skills or abilities as you progress in the game. He's been trained as an assassin for years, so it's generally presumed that he already has all these skills and abilities. So, all you really unlock as the game progresses are different starting points, different tools to make your life easier, that sort of thing. So, the question that you're going to ask about this implied knowledge is how does it affect real life? What does it have to do with anything in real life? Is it just applied to fictional characters? I'm glad you asked that. That's very smart thinking to ask that question. Now, in real life, we imply a certain degree of knowledge based upon the sort of person we're dealing with. It's really very interesting. So I'm going to use a personal experience of mine. So I've worked with children for pretty much most of my adult life. In one job or another, I've worked with children, and I have a great deal of experience doing it, and, I've become quite good at it. However, there's an assumption done by a lot of people who work with children in the children industry that men automatically are not good at working with children. They just don't have it in them to work with children. Whereas the inverse is true for women, that women are automatically good at working with children. So I'm going to give a theoretical thing based upon my own experience, which is, so let's take two people who start working with children. One's a man, one's a woman. Now, what tends to happen, is that the man will be constantly, criticized. Oftentimes, in a positive way, but sometimes in a not so positive way, in quite a negative way. The man will be criticized, in how they work with children, and so on, because we told, no, you don't do that, this is how you do it, and so on. Now, as a result of this criticism, men who stick it out and work with children tend to get really good with working with children. They learn, okay, this is what I do around children, this is what I don't do, that sort of thing. Now, the same does not apply to women. It's presumed that women already know how to work with children, so when they do get corrected, you know, it tends to be much softer sort of correction. It's almost always a nice sort of correction, unless there's a personality issue between the person correcting and the person being corrected. They tend to be, you know, treated quite nicely and so on. So oftentimes, not always, just sometimes, a woman who works with children never learns how to work with children because
I'm a little busy at the moment.
She doesn't learn to work with children because, you know, there's that assumed knowledge. It's assumed that she's automatically really, really good at working with children. And so, ironically enough, if you actually approach, you know, or if you take a look at this sort of thing, men tend to be really good, who work with children tend to be really good at working with children because they've had to learn how to be really good at working with children. They've had to, you know, apply this sort of knowledge. And, yeah, and then a lot of times, not always, but sometimes you'll get women who are completely useless at working with children, but they believe they're really, really good at it, and, you know, they're almost impossible to teach because of this belief and this kind of assumption that people have, this assumed knowledge that men are going to be bad at this, women are going to be good at this. And so that's how that's applied. Now, there are dozens of different examples in life of this same sort of thing happening. For example, you know, it's, you know, that's, working with children tends to be a female-dominated industry, which is why this problem exists. In male-dominated industries, a similar problem happens when women work in that same sort of situation. You know, and hence we get terms like mansplaining and so on. Well, for a man working in a female-dominated industry, they get womansplained to a lot. So that's kind of how the knowledge is implied in real life. We apply, you know, a certain knowledge, certain skills and abilities to certain people based on, you know, really nothing in particular, just based on exterior appearances. It's assumed that, say, a person who is black is automatically going to be good at sports, for example. Or, you know, that a person who's, you know, a person who wears glasses and is kind of nerdy is automatically going to know how to use a computer perfectly. You know, we make these weird sort of assumed knowledges, these assumptions about people based on this kind of, these, I cannot think of the right word, I apologize, but we assume that people have knowledge that they don't necessarily have because we think of people in a certain regard, in a certain way. And, well, biases. Biases is a good word for this. We have this bias that a person who has this particular trait is going to automatically be good at something. You know, speaking for myself, I'm fairly useless at computers. Whatever knowledge I gain tends to be from playing video games and, you know, just working with something over and over again. You know, and I wear glasses, and I'm kind of nerdy. I can tell you all about classic Doctor Who. So, you know, it's this concept, this idea of assumed knowledge is that we kind of bring and come into situations in the world. So, you know, I think the old saying, never make assumptions, is a good one. Is good for us to apply into real life and into how we make our own assumptions, how we do these sort of things. So, anyway, that's the video on assumed knowledge. I covered a wide variety of topics of, you know, how we learn, Mary Sue, how video games have us learn, and finally, how this applies to real life. So we're going to look at this giant windmill. Look at all the dead birds underneath. Nah, I'm just kidding. But look at these lovely windmills, and leave you there. Like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.